So now in this video, we're going to do a step-by-step build of this circuit, but there it is in schematic form, and that's what it does. There are two NPN bipolar junction transistors. I'm using the 2N2222. Not crucial though, but NPN bipolar junction transistors. They're wired in Astable multivibrator mode. So now, since I'm using 220 ohms to protect LEDs, I didn't write a voltage there. I should have wrote 5 volts though. I'm going to use 5 volts at the power supply. If you use a higher voltage, you'll probably want to use higher value resistors to protect the LEDs. Other than that, the components are, you can adjust them quite a bit. 10 kilo ohms, 10,000 ohms is a lot higher than 220 ohms, so you can go quite a bit lower or quite a bit higher. But in any case, that helps set the timing, as does the capacitor side. So I'm going to turn the power off. We're going to quickly pull this apart. We saw what it does, and now I'm going to do a step-by-step build. And there's probably a number of ways you could do this, but I find this easiest. So first off, I started with the capacitors. Now, you see the capacitors are sideways, actually like this, on the schematic, and that one is like that. When it comes to building circuits, you don't build them the way you see them on schematics, other than making connections. So the positive side of the capacitor, the cathode of the LED, and the collector of the transistor all have to connect to the same point, and probably on the same row. If you put them on multiple rows, you need a little jumper. But in any case, we're not going to put the capacitor sideways like you see in the schematic. What we're going to do is take the more positive side, and since we're going to put it to the collector, and we can see the emitter goes to the negative rail there, the collector is 2 spots above that. So I already have jumpers there, but I'm just going to kind of center this one and put the more positive side of the capacitor. I'm using 47 microfarad capacitor 2 rows above that jumper. And this is kind of a mirror image, these two sides, except for we have a jumper that will go across at some point. But we'll wire the right side and the left side exactly the same until we get to a couple of jumpers. So I can just take this same capacitor, also 47 microfarad, and again, 2 spots above that jumper, and on the positive side, these are electrolytic capacitors. You can only charge them in one direction. If you use a quite a bit smaller value capacitor than what these are, they might not be polarized where you can charge them one way or the other. This can only be more positive than that side, or you can discharge it completely. But for polarized capacitors, you want to set them like this. Now, we can go to the LEDs. That's pretty straightforward. They go to the more positive side of the capacitor. As you can see there, the cathode does. The anode goes up 1 row. And so we're going to take the LED there. You can see the shorter lead right there. That's the one I'm going to plug with the capacitor right there. And I'll put it off to the side because we're going to leave the middle for the transistor. So same side there, short lead the cathode to the positive side of the capacitor, long lead the anode up 1 row, and then we take a 220 ohm resistor to the positive rail. And we're only going to use 5 volts, so 220 ohms will work. Again, if you're going to use a higher voltage, which is plenty fine, use higher value resistors right here. And the rest of the circuit you could leave the same. And again, we got 220 ohms over here to the positive rail. Right there. So now, before we do the transistors, let's go over here. You can see the negative side of the capacitors. Interestingly enough, the 10 kilo ohm resistor goes to the positive rail. And then we got the other side. We're going to have a jumper going to the base of the transistor, but you notice you go through the emitter, there's the negative side of the rail. So that's how it can be more negative over there. So even though it's connected to the positive, there's an easier path to negative, so it can get more negative. And so, really simple. On the breadboard, we got this whole long rail here, power rail. So we can take a 10,000 ohm resistor right there, right next to the capacitor, and same over here, right to the positive rail, right there. So now, when it comes to the transistor, let's zoom in so we can see this a little easier. This is going to get a little bit confusing, but I already put jumpers down there. I didn't have the jumpers when I first wired this. The pin layout for this. So we're looking at the flat side right now. This is the 2N2222. It says A after it. And so it is emitter to the left, base to the middle, and collector to the right. If the transistor starts with 2N, I found that's the pin layout. So this is 2N2222. If there's letters or numbers before the 2N, that might be different, but every 2N I have so far, emitter, base, collector. So we're going to swivel like this. The arrow is the emitter. That's the main thing. So you see the schematic here, I got one drawn facing that way, but the arrow is at the bottom of both of them. So both of them are going to face in the same direction. Emitter, base in the middle, and then collector on top. It will go into the breadboard similar to what you see on the schematic. So the emitter goes to the negative rail, so I got that jumper to the negative rail, but I didn't have that at first. I just had the collector I put to the positive side of the capacitor right there, and the cathode of the LED. So I do the same thing on the other side. Let's see if we can tilt this, get a little better view. But collector to the positive side of the capacitor, and so now the base is floating, but the emitter, let's see if we can see that, there we go, we can see that the emitter goes to the negative rail. So now, this is pretty obnoxious. I have done this with jumpers like these that are flat on the board, and also I made some little ones that jump a gap. So I've done videos on this circuit where I had one laying flat and then a little one jumping the gap. I'm just going to use these really nice jumpers here that plug right into the board, and I hope actually one of these is not a 2N2222. I have something else on the board that looks, it's in the same TO92 package, there we go, that I want to keep on there. So now we have the 2N2222 right there. So that goes to the base, the middle pin, and then it goes to the opposing capacitor, the capacitor on the other side of the board. So first we'll do this one. This one's a little easier to see, the one on the left. But as you can see there, we connect to the base, and then it slides over to the negative side of the capacitor on the other side, which connects also with this resistor right there. So we got that node. Three things there. The base of the transistor, even though it's on the opposite side of the jumper, and then we have the negative side of the capacitor and the resistor, 10 kilo ohm resistor, that goes to the positive rail right there. And we do the same thing with the other side. Really simple right there. And middle pin, the base of the transistor. It's getting kind of crowded, you might not be able to see that, but I'm going to go to the middle pin right there, and then to the negative side of that capacitor and the resistor that goes to the rail there. So we have that wired up. We can zoom back a little bit more, and we can see we got 5 volts there. I'll hit the power button, and we have it in astable mode right there. So now, there's a good chance you don't have the exact same value components that I have. So maybe you don't have 47 microfarad, or you want to use a different value for whatever reason. So I'm not going to swap the capacitors. The main thing is you need the capacitors and the resistors to set the speed. So right now, with these particular value capacitors, we have 10 kilo ohm resistors. So I'm going to quickly pluck them. And you saw the pace there. The pace is you know, somewhat rapid, but you know, you can really tell which one's lit up when and whatnot. So it's that was kind of a nice pace. Also, you can kind of mess with this a little bit, touching the capacitors like that. I don't know how well you can see that, but in any case, that's lit up kind of faintly. So that's kind of a fun thing to just play around with right there. But in any case, let's get back to business. We are going to replace the 10 kilo ohm resistors with 3 kilo ohm resistors. So we got that one there, and so this has to go to the positive rail right there. And now it is flashing probably a little more than 3 times as fast. So hopefully the camera picks that up. But in any case, you can adjust the resistor values. Again, we're using 5 volts. You don't want to go below 220, but you can play around any range you want. So you can use any value capacitor you want, and then just adjust the resistors accordingly. If they look like they're both on at the same time, you might be able to tell they're flashing a little better if I do that. But if it looks like they're on at the same time, they're actually flashing so fast that they both look like they're on. So use higher value resistors. But in any case, you can change the speed with the resistors or the capacitors. You probably have a wider range of values of resistors than capacitors. So use a convenient value for capacitors and adjust the resistors accordingly.